Hi everyone, and welcome to Core Lecture 9. Today we'll discuss conducting preliminary research. Before we begin, take a moment to gather the materials that you'll need in order to complete today's lecture assignment. First, you'll need a document to write on, and then you'll need access to the internet. More specifically, you'll want to be able to access Google or another similar search engine. You'll want to be able to get onto Wikipedia as well as Twitter. And one thing that I do want to note with Twitter is that you will not need an active account in order to access the advanced search feature that we're going to be using today. So if you're not into Twitter, if you don't have an account, you are not in a position where you have to get one, of course. Because again, the feature that we're going to be using is just readily accessible to anyone. The purpose and goals for today's lecture are as follows. We'll examine the role of research in the composition process, we'll understand the need for preliminary research, and we'll explore methods for conducting preliminary research. Now, let's think about what secondary research is and how preliminary research fits into that and performing preliminary searches. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is that preliminary research should not be confused with primary research. Now, if you've taken Lib 1010 or a similar course, you've probably heard the terms primary and secondary sources or primary and secondary research used quite frequently. Now, primary research indicates that you yourself have composed and compiled the information that you are using to support your argument all on your own. Now, this means that you can go out and conduct interviews with people, you can distribute and analyze surveys, you can conduct an experiment, perform an experiment. But really what it comes down to is that you, as the person presenting the argument and whose argument your readers are engaging with, you are the one who is collecting that information. Now, secondary source, secondary research, again, are going to be the works that are done by others, and they can take several forms, really. So most commonly in projects 3 and 4, you're going to be working with things like scholarly articles, books, and government reports. But secondary sources and secondary research can also come in the form of websites, blogs, or social media posts. But ultimately what it comes down to is that this is information, these are ideas, this is data, these are conclusions that you yourself did not reach, but that you are borrowing from someone else. Now, when we think about preliminary research, especially in an academic setting, what that really comes down to is creating a well-rounded but approachable understanding of a topic we're interested in. Now, if I were to say, okay, now go and search your topic on the library databases, you are going to come up with so many results. Some of them are going to be, kind of relevant. Most of them might be not really relevant, but they have some key terms, and a couple are just going to be absolutely perfect and exactly what you need. But we conduct preliminary research in order to hopefully make that process a little easier. So when we conduct preliminary research, so before we go to the library databases, conducting preliminary research on more accessible and readily available digital platforms, we can get a better sense of what are the key words in the discussion going on that I can use in the academic databases. Who are some of the key players, maybe authors that I can search in the library databases. So you can see how conducting preliminary research and not just going straight to the library databases can make that process of searching the library databases much easier, because you go in having a better understanding of what the current conversations on your topic are, what are some of the pressing key terms and questions, and who are some of the leading voices in those discussions. Now, when we think about methods for conducting preliminary research, the first thing that you're going to need to do is have a topic for research in mind, along with some ideas that you want to explore in greater detail. So let's say my topic is, let's go with climate change, right? And so maybe I'm also interested in, let's say, global warming, and let's go with renewable energy. Okay, so if I'm interested in climate change overall, that could be the topic that I'm exploring. I know exactly, what I'm going into. So I'm looking at climate change. I'm not looking at immigration. I'm not looking at the cost of college. I'm not looking at, different tax policies or education policies. I'm looking at climate change. But if you're in a position where you can narrow that down a bit further, I could say, yeah, I'm interested regarding climate change, global warming, and renewable energy. So what I would like you to do then is identify a problem you'd like to write on for project 2. Now I will say this can be the same topic that you've used for the previous core lectures for core lecture 7 and 8, but if you're sort of debating between one topic or another, perhaps this is a good opportunity to explore, but that is entirely up to you. So identify a problem you'd like to write on for project 2. So after we have that topic for research in mind, we want to brainstorm words or ideas that we could search, that we could put in to Google, or that we could find on Wikipedia or on Twitter. Now, I always recommend start broad and then narrow as you go. So let's say if we go back here and we start, let's go keywords, phrases, ideas. So we've already got a couple: global warming, renewable energy, but if I want to look at it in this way, maybe I also type in fossil fuels, let's say carbon emissions, because I cannot spell today. Emissions, there we go. Let's say environmental impact, ozone layer. Okay, so as we go through here, you can see that based off of my particular focus on maybe global warming and renewable energy, you can see how that is going to help me shape the keywords and ideas that I come up with. So even if I looked at climate change, I could also approach it from the perspective of rising sea levels, extreme weather, things like that. So you can tell by the way in which you want to approach or focus that topic is still going to change the keywords that you use. But you can also see here that we started broad. Global warming and renewable energy are still rather broad topics under the climate change umbrella. But as we move further down the list, as I continue to brainstorm ideas, I got more specific. I said renewable energy. Okay, well, I know that sort of opposite that are fossil fuels, but I also know that carbon emissions are, in the topic or in the conversation of fossil fuels. And maybe I'm interested in the environmental impact of those, specifically regarding the ozone layer. So you can see how we did definitely start off broad, but just because as we started thinking about it more and really started to pay careful attention to how we can narrow this topic, we were able to develop more precise keywords that will aid us in our search. Okay, let's hop back here. Now, for your lecture assignment, what I would like you to do is basically do what I just did. Based on the topic that you've identified, I'd like you to brainstorm 5 words or phrases that will help you gather information on your topic. So that, think about if you were to pair climate change with fossil fuels, or climate change and environmental impact, climate change and renewable energy. Something that will help you create a more specific understanding and a more guided, and will help you perform a more guided and focused search. All right, now let's talk about how we can apply that. So we've got the topic, we've got the keywords. Cool. Now what do we do with that? Well, like I said, don't immediately go to the library databases. The library databases are fantastic. They absolutely are. However, there's a lot of stuff there. And more importantly, a lot of the content that you are going to come across, it's not like it's a 2-page news article. Oftentimes, these are 20, 30 pages worth of academic writing. That's a lot to sift through, and it is very time consuming to go through all of them and say, oh, okay, is this really as relevant as I'm hoping? And so we are hoping to familiarize ourselves enough with this topic to where perhaps we can refine those keywords, or we know what to keep an eye out for as we go through the library databases. Three places that I really like to turn to, and I always suggest other writers turn to when conducting preliminary research, would be going to Google or another popular search engine, Wikipedia, and Twitter. So some notes that I want to make with these. So Google, yes, you're going to have a lot of search results, but they're going to be shorter. So again, with the library databases, you might be getting, hits of, 1,000 hits on the terms that you use. Well, Google, you might get, 50,000, just kind of throwing an example out there. But what Google is doing is they are able to personalize the results for you, which might make it a bit easier. And a lot of the content that they are going to prioritize will be shorter in nature. So again, it's reading the equivalent to 2 pages versus 40 pages. Wikipedia. Wikipedia has, I feel like people on the college campus are split on Wikipedia. I think Wikipedia is a fantastic tool to familiarize yourself with a topic, and it can actually be a good place to find to understand who the big names in a specific field are. Now, would I recommend citing a Wikipedia article in anything that you write in the college classroom or in the professional sector? Absolutely not. There are still some issues with Wikipedia that make it a questionable source to reference, but it can give you an effective, thorough understanding of a topic overall, and again, can turn you to perhaps very credible sources, as we'll see here in a moment. And then Twitter. So with Twitter, that might seem really unconventional, and I oftentimes will see students sort of raise their eyebrows like, we're using Twitter to conduct research? Yes. So the reason that we use Twitter, especially with preliminary research, is because Twitter not only can link us to more information and sometimes scholarly information, depending on what accounts we look at and what terms that we use, but what's so valuable about Twitter that I don't think that you get on Google or Wikipedia or similar type sites, Twitter lets us know what the discussions are in real time regarding the topic. So rather than reading this government report that came out 2 years ago on climate change, perhaps I can go on Twitter now, look at what, the most recent March for Science happen to focus around, and I can see how people are talking about it. Maybe they're introducing new ideas that might be so recent that they're not mentioned in academic works or in government reports, which oftentimes does happen. So Twitter gives you a good idea. Not only can it link you or direct you to more credible sources, but it gives you an idea of what the conversation on your topic is like in real time. So what we are going to do, so if we go on to Google, let's say I just research climate change, right? Okay, so you can see here that we've already got a lot of search results. Yeah, we have a lot of content that we can work with here. Now, what's great about Google is, let's say I'm interested in news regarding climate change. So rather than going to a government report, I can go to more news-oriented. I can go to a more news-oriented part of Google. And so that way I'm just getting things from like Politico or the Chicago Tribune or Time or let's see, the New York Times, things of that sort. So if I'm looking for more, a quicker turnaround periodical, I could go here. Also, if I wanted images, I could go here to see what sort of images exist regarding climate change videos. Maybe I'm interested in a YouTube video that talks about climate change or a TED Talk. So perhaps I could go here and see what is available. So just by typing in climate change, I've got a ton of results that I have to work with. And by using Google, I'm not just restricted to articles or to books, but I can find other information. I can find that information presented in very different ways. So be it as an image, be it as a video, be it as an article or an infographic or whatever the case may be. So, and again, here you can see that we have a number of solid results, everything from government reports. So how do we know? So from NASA, more stuff from NASA. We've also got more popular sources from like the New York Times. We have things from other countries. I believe this looks like Australia, perhaps. I'm not quite sure. So, see if it loads here in a second. There we go. So perhaps if I'm interested on the international, we'll look at that if it decides to load later. But let's say we decide to look at support our argument later on through a more international or global perspective. Maybe that's, if Australia has, some interesting research from their side of the globe, we can also look at it there as well. So let's try putting climate change and let's go to one of our keywords and see what we get. So let's go with climate change and renewable energy. And also what is great about Google is I typed in climate change and we can already see how there are several other key terms that we can develop depending on our interest in the research that we do. So as we go through, maybe we start off by looking at climate change and renewable energy. But as I see this, I'm like, man, I didn't think about agriculture and food security. Maybe that's something that I look into and further shapes my understanding of the topic. So let's go with renewable energy. Okay, great. So again, we can already see how combining our combining key terms, we've sort of narrowed our search results down just a bit, but we still have a lot of results here. And again, we can still go and search by images. So we've got a lot of infographics here. We can search, heck, even by maps. Depending on if there's a specific geographic region that we want to look at. Now, let's say we go with climate change and we just search it in general, and that should bring us up to the Wikipedia page. So let's look at Wikipedia now. So we've got climate change here, Wikipedia. Okay, so like I said, I would not recommend citing Wikipedia in any kind of academic or professional work, but again, it is great for giving you a well-rounded overall understanding on a specific topic. But it can also direct you to other sources and other bits of information. So we can see here that it's, when we think about climate change, we can think at it, its influences, outputs, things of that sort, geographical considerations, human impacts, um, evidence and effects, things of that sort. But if we're scrolling through, let's say I'm like, hey, I never thought about the impact of volcano eruptions on climate change. So again, by doing this research, by going to Wikipedia, perhaps that's another key term that I can add to search in the library databases if after reading this, I find this interesting and worth exploring in greater detail. But let's say as we go through, we see these little numbers here. These are going to be our footnotes. So you can see that the sources are cited as we go. So maybe I'm like, hey, this is a really interesting tidbit of information. So I go down here. Let's say So it brings me down to their works cited, their references, bibliography, tomato, depending on what source style guide you use. So where is 61? Of course, it was the very bottom of the page and I missed it. There we go. Okay. So I can click on this and it should take me to this report. Now, is Wikipedia credible? And would I recommend including it as a credible source in an academic work? Absolutely not. But you can see how Wikipedia guided us to a government report, which would be considered scholarly. So from there, we just eliminated a small reason for going to the library databases in this point. Of course, you can still find this information there, but we were able to more easily jump from Wikipedia to this just like that. And so after reading it, maybe you find yourself saying, oh yeah, this is really fascinating information and will help me with my exploration on climate change. So, and then of course, you can continue to search. You can use this as something that you cite in, in a piece. Again, so because for government reports are often seen as scholarly reports. So now let's look at Twitter. Okay, so again, this is the one that people usually raise their eyebrows at, like really we're using Twitter. But like I said, Twitter allows us to understand what the conversation looks like regarding our topics. So let's go climate change. Now, as we go through, perhaps we're looking for a specific phrase, or let's say we are looking into like the Me Too movement or something of that sort, or we want to trace a specific hashtag, so we could type that here, Me Too, and that would bring up the results. Of course, for research in climate change, Me Too might be a little out of our view, but you can certainly use that as well. And you can see actually how these search features and these prompts will reflect and look similar to what you will see on the library databases once we get into those a bit more. So this can actually be a good place for developing those search terms and putting them, kind of tinkering around with different ways to search before we hop onto the library databases. You can also search by language as well. So let's say, you want to look at conversations in Spanish or in French or in Japanese or whatever the case may be, you can do that there. Also, if there are certain people who you are interested in reading the thoughts of regarding your topic, you can find their accounts. You can also go by geographic location. So if you just want to understand what the conversation on, your topic is in the Vegas area or in the St. George area or in Salt Lake, you can limit it by geography. And then, of course, dates as well. So if there was a certain event and you just want the conversation, let's say from January 20th to the 27th, then that'll limit it by the time that the tweets were published. So let's start off just with climate change and see what Twitter has to offer. Okay, so we can see here that we already have a number of results here. And when we use Twitter, we can see here that it goes top, latest, people. We can even search people if we want, photos, videos, news, broadcasts, things of that nature. So, well, looks like Angela Merkel. So if we look at climate change and we search that term, let's say, okay, so let's look at this article from The Hill, right, that they tweeted out. So that's why we saw Angela Merkel, because Germany to shut down all 84 of its coal-fired plants in effort to fight climate change. So climate change, but also, it gets at some of the concepts we looked at on this list, like fossil fuels, in how it relates to coal and perhaps like carbon emissions, environmental impact, things of that sort. So I can always read the article and I would always recommend doing that, but perhaps we're going through here, and we always want to consider the rhetorical context. So who is tweeting this out? Who might be a likely follower of that account? What are the ideologies informing their views and their responses to really, better understand what this conversation looks like? So as we go through here, we've got some clapping. Let's see. Germany, one of the leaders of liberal democracy and climate change. We've got some clapping. The leader of the free world, Germany, you are no. Okay, so we can see at least from this tweet that people are in support of it. And so what this can also do is allow you to say, okay, how might my audience respond to this information? And how does that influence the type of research I deem as valuable to incorporate into my later original works? So, like I said, Twitter, it may seem super unconventional, and I completely understand when I get the eyebrows raised, but again, it can give you the opportunity to better understand what the conversations are. And I will also say with people, if you go through here, sometimes you can find experts in the field who frequently tweet relevant and credible works. So, we can, let's see here. So, wow, there are a lot of government-based one, so you can follow UN climate change because they're going to be putting out government type reports, which again are going to be credible because they are being conducted by experts in the field. But we also, again, if we can go down, say, oh, this person is the executive secretary of UN climate change, so perhaps we can see what Patricia Espinosa has to say on that. And so we can follow her, we can see what she's tweeting, and again, how that leads us to understand more about the topic of climate change and how people are responding to it. So, going back to our lecture assignment, what I would like you to do is, using one of the 5 keywords or phrases that you developed, search a relevant term that would provide you with more information on your topic. So those 5 words that you came up with, I don't care which one you use, it's all up to you. Now I'd like you to conduct searches using Google, Twitter, and Wikipedia. So all 3 platforms that we just looked at. And then I'd like you to write a brief statement. Now, you don't have to write me a novel. In fact, don't exceed more than 50 words if you can on the information you gathered from each. So, what did you find on Google? Was it more government reports that were presented right out the gate? Did you notice that you were getting more things from mainstream media? Did you get more blogs? Or, what kind of content was coming up? And what sort of information were you presented with that might lead to a better understanding of your topic? Twitter, what are those conversations looking like? What other kind of key terms or hashtags are trending along with your keywords? What kind of accounts do you see most frequently? In Wikipedia, what kind of content are they including? Who are they citing? So these are all things that you can think to address in your write-up for each platform: Google, Twitter, and Wikipedia. Okay, so for the weekly homework, you will need to include your Core Lecture 9 summary and assignment in your Week 4 submission. Also, remember, you'll need to include the summaries and lecture assignments for Core Lectures 7, 8, and 9, as well as the summary and lecture assignment of a mini lecture of your choice. And make sure that you submit your Week 4 homework to Canvas by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, February 3rd. Now, if you have any questions or if you would like to discuss these concepts further, please feel free to contact me via Canvas's direct messaging. So, all right, everyone, until next time.